Okay, this is a meeting of the Preservation Board for Monday, February the 28th. In order to begin, I will call a roll to establish who's here. Commissioner Allen, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Commissioner Robinson, are you here? Commissioner Hamilton, are you here?
Here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Commissioner Colleen, L. Bronco, are you here?
B.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, are you here?
Present.
Alderman Coder, are you here? And Commissioner Callow is here. So if Commissioner Robinson joins us in progress, we will add him. Alderman Coder will not be present today. Commissioners, looking at the agenda, which hope you have before you. Agenda item A, 1027 to 1029, is not going to be discussed today at the request of Alderman Coder, who cannot be here, and the Neighborhood Association, which has not yet been consulted. So the agenda that I propose is the agenda before you minus agenda item A. Does anybody else have anything they need to add or subtract from the agenda?
Yes, Commissioner, I would like to find out, we are ready. This
I'm
is
sorry, who's speaking?
Are you there? Hello?
Who's speaking?
Orlando Askins. We are representing agenda A, and we are prepared to go forward. And we understand that they requested a deferment, but we've been patiently trying to get this thing done for a while. And it's my understanding that all docs went out on time, and the notification was given out as to this being on the agenda, and everyone had equal time to review this, and we're prepared to go forward. And we just don't see it being fair for us to have to wait any additional time.
Well, this certainly will not postpone any action you might take on the project. If you'd like to apply for permits, you can. A preliminary review is a courtesy offered by the Cultural Resources Office and the Preservation Board.
Well, we don't feel confident going forward without getting the Preservation Board hearing this. It's an expensive proposition for us to risk doing something of this nature and not having it heard and approved. We've been trying to do this for quite some time. And, you know, it seems as if we're ready. Everyone else is ready. It's a two-family that we're proposing to do, not anything commercial, or anything huge, or anything crazy. So we're hoping that the board will go ahead and allow us to make our case and hear us.
Well, there's no case to make. It's a preliminary review, and
Case may be the wrong word. I apologize.
Yeah. Commissioners, do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda without agenda item A?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second it for discussion. Commissioners, we've been asked by a member of the Preservation Board, who's also the alderman in whose ward this project is, to delay consideration for preliminary review because the Neighborhood Association has not had time to see the latest iterations of it. That seems to me to be a reasonable request. It does not delay the project in any way, because they could in fact proceed.
Well, just as a point of discussion, just to think about it, we could hear this and say, you know, and render our thoughts just so he kind of knows what we think, but have a motion saying, you know, you must come back with neighborhood review or alderman review or something before we give our final, sort of an informal. Just a thought.
Any other commissioners?
Maybe,
Yeah.
I guess if all the deadlines were met, I guess I don't understand why we're delaying it.
Because the alderman in whose ward it is,
Uh-huh.
and the neighborhood association, and a member of the preservation board asked us to delay it a month so that they could participate in the discussion.
Okay,
I mean, that seems like a courtesy, since a preliminary review has no deadlines on it,
mhm.
and it doesn't delay the project in any way, it doesn't have to delay the project in any way. I think if it were in my ward and I could not be here to discuss it, and I asked us to postpone it, I'd probably want us to postpone it.
So it's a courtesy, but is that an official rule? So I guess I'd ask, does council want to weigh in on this? I'm wondering if we're stepping on toes here.
To your question, I don't believe there is an official rule in your bylaws that speaks to that. No, I think that, is it a courtesy? Yes, apparently that is a basis, one basis for the request. Everything else that the chairman has said is also true, that permit applications can be made. This is a preliminary design review.
Mr. Chairman.
Who's speaking?
Commissioner Allen.
Yes, sir.
My thought is that the Cultural Resources Office has already reviewed this design, and if we were going to hear it but not act today, that seems like it offers very little additional to the applicant. I think waiting would be better, or making a decision today as a board. But the staff has undertaken a pretty thorough review that I think offers some clear guidance. So we have our staff opinion. So I wouldn't be against waiting till next month.
Okay. Commissioners, there's a motion on the floor. It is to approve an agenda that does not include agenda item A. I'll take a roll. Commissioner Allen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
No,
Commissioner Colleen, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
No.
That is 3 noes and 2 yeses. The motion fails. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as written?
my motion is to approve the agenda as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
The ayes have it. Okay. Old business, commissioners, who's read the January 24th Preservation Board minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I've read them and I move that we accept the minutes from the January 24th meeting.
Second,
I second.
any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, commissioners, that is an approval of those minutes. Next on the agenda, special agenda item.
Yes, Mr. Whiteley is trying to join us. He's unable to get in right now, so if we can take that perhaps a little bit later on in the meeting.
Yeah, we just approved an agenda. Shouldn't we wait?
Trying to reach him right now. There's apparently some technical difficulties on his end.
Okay. Agenda item A, 1027 to 29.
Right. Andrea Kagan. This is a review of a proposal for 2 attached 3-story buildings. The owner originally applied in December 2020. and the application was denied and didn't comply with the Soulard Historic District standards. It was denied by the board, and so the applicant has come back and worked with us again to try to come up with something that is closer, fit the historic district standards. We had, well, obviously know what the alderman was to defer it, as well as the neighborhood. Next. This is the location at the corner of Lamai and Menard. Next. And this is the new model example. It's 1852 South 10th Street. This basically is they doubled this to create the 2 attached townhouses. Next. This is the site plan. If you recall before, originally they had wanted to do front end garages. They have changed that to 2 parking pads, which still will have 2 curb cuts, but it doesn't create the problem we had with the model example. Next. This is the proposed front elevation next to the adjacent building. Next. And this is the side elevation. You might recall before we had an issue with the ratio of solid to void, but that is taken care of. And then the other thing on this elevation that's an issue is they are wanting to use vinyl siding on the portion that extends past the brick part. And we are asking for cementitious siding, as it's not, you need a model example as it's a public facade. And also the portion of the back that faces, well, they have wrapped around. Next. I'll talk about this side first. We I'd also ask that the brick on this side extend past the window, as the distance between that building and the adjacent building has increased due to the parking pad. The owner stated that he would do that, but we haven't received the drawings for that. Next. This is the rear elevation I was talking about. They did wrap around the brick on the first and second story. Part of this facade also is in front of the adjacent building, which makes it a semi-public facade. So technically they would need a model example to use vinyl siding on that portion of the building. Next. This is on the left is the building adjacent on Lamai, and on the right is the building adjacent on Menard. As you can see, there is the building next to it does sit back from the street. Next. This is a view of the lot from the opposite corner and from the Menard side. Next. This is just some context across Lamai and across Menard. Next. This shows the setback of the adjacent building and some context northeast on Menard. Next. And then just some context on Lamai looking towards the west. Next. And some context looking southeast and northeast on Menard on the property. Okay, so the setback partially complies with the setback of the adjacent structure on Lamai, but it will sit in front of the adjacent building on Menard. The majority of the buildings on Menard do sit at the sidewalk. and the building that was originally on the structure did as well. The mass substantially complies with the standards. It's much larger than the narrow two-story building that's behind it, but the majority of the buildings on Menard and Lamai are larger buildings, similar in mass to what's proposed. Then the proportions also comply. They're similar to those on the adjacent building on the Lamai and the model example. And as I said before, the facade material and color partially complies. There will be brick on the public facades with a 12-foot return on the west elevation. The distance between the buildings, however, is 14 feet. The portion of the rear elevation will sit in front of the adjacent building on Menard, which makes a portion a smaller public facade. And that portion of the rear elevation is proposed to be vinyl siding, as is the researched portion of the Menard elevation. The Cultural Resources Office has asked the Preservation Board to grant preliminary approval to the project with conditions that the siding on the east elevation and rear of the building be 4-inch cementitious lap siding, and that the Cultural Resources Office review and approve final design details and exterior materials and colors. Now, I will say that the neighborhood, while they hadn't gotten a letter because they were hoping it would be deferred, I do have some general things that they were concerned about. They were not happy about the curb cuts, and the parking slabs. They were in agreement with the Cultural Resources Office that the siding should be the cement board siding and not vinyl. And that they wanted the brick veneer to wrap further back on the west and north elevations. And they felt that the site plan was insufficiently detailed. And there's not, I think part of it was the slope on the Menard side, and how that parking pad is being handled because the building next to it is at a higher grade. And there was a few discrepancies in the elevations inside in the floor plans matching, although that's something that normally we could handle when we're reviewing it further, since this is just a preliminary review. Questions?
Yeah. So, yeah, Andy, I've got a question. So this issue that they had with the curb cut, or the curb cuts, and then the detailing of the one curb cut, is that something that can be addressed by you guys, or is that not in your purview?
Well, the curb cuts, technically, it's not, and I don't believe that's particularly in the standards, except for the fact that it's kind of falls into the slope of the yard. Now, on the Lamai side, I don't think that's so much of an issue because there's not a huge grade change there at that point. The one at the back, I would say that falls more within our purview, not so much the curb cut, but the parking pad, because it's kind of all tied together, but because there is a change of the grade there, because the back of that yard kind of slopes up towards the existing building behind on Menard. So it would be helpful to have a little bit more detail on how that was being handled.
Okay. And do you feel you got the usual community consultation that you would get from Soulard on this, or is
No, I think they didn't receive the revised plans until the preliminary agenda came out because the applicant hadn't gone to them previously. So they have had, I guess, since the 18th, it was the first time they saw them.
Okay, and that answer would be the same with the alderman. He saw it at that time too.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
May I interject, or should I wait till all parties are completed there?
I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay. Well, kind of to answer your question.
Chairman, can the other commissioners ask questions before the?
I apologize. Go ahead.
Sorry, who's speaking?
That was Orlando, but I'll wait. I didn't know if I needed to wait for all parties to ask their questions or if I could directly address Mr. Colleen's concerns about the curb cut.
Nah, you're not going to get to do that unless he asks you a question, and we haven't
Well,
quite got.
it was pertaining to seeing the drawings in advance as well.
Questions from commissioners of staff?
Yeah, so, the SRG just got them a week ago then, a little more than a week ago?
Yeah, a little week and a half.
And how long have you had them?
We didn't, we had been working with them before that. I didn't get the final revised plans till that day.
So that you got the final revised plans on the 18th as well?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Further questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
One at a time.
Yes, and
Welcome.
thank you. I appreciate being here. So Andrea, so the SRG received the plans essentially the day you received them, which was the 18th. So everyone's had the plans for about 10 days now.
Yeah, I mean, we had previously, we had.
You had been working with
Right.
with the developer prior to that, but
Yeah.
SRG has had them for 10 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Further
Question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Andrea, do we do anything about trees? I noticed in some of the pictures, there's lots of large trees. Do you know if they plan on just bulldozing all that, or can they save any of them?
That you'd have to ask the applicant.
Okay.
I'm not aware.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask him or?
No,
Okay,
as soon as he makes his presentation,
thank
there'll
you.
be, we'll direct questions from commissioners to the applicant.
Got it.
Otherwise, it will be as chaotic as Mardi Gras has been in Soulard, and probably just as distracting to members of the restoration group.
So I have one more question. So in your write-up, it said that it looked like there was partial compliance with a bunch of items. So I guess I'm not fully certain of it. You said mass scale garage placement, a ratio of solid to void.
That actually, I think, was a leftover from the previous one. It substantially complies. The only thing it does that only partially complies with is the setback and the siding.
Okay, I guess because you didn't have time to update the staff report when he turned in the new drawings on the 18th.
Yeah, we hadn't got all the details at that point. So.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from commissioners? Okay, Mr. Askins, let's hear from you.
I'm going to speak briefly, and I think you can also direct questions to Jason. He's the architect. He's in the meeting as well. But I just wanted to address, I guess Mr. Colleen had questioned regarding how, and I think, and Commissioner Robson as well, we made every effort to try and get Soulard involved after we were declined back in June. I spoke directly with Alderman Jack, and I have many correspondence with him requesting if he wants me to meet with anyone or sit with anyone to let me know, and or if he could put me in touch with those parties. That never occurred. What eventually occurred was he recommended that I speak directly with Meg and Andrea, and that's what we had been doing for the past 4 months or so, back, kind of back and forth to get closer. And I think that we all agree that we've gotten closer. We've made substantial compromises and corrections to the drawings from, I think if you if any of you recall what we had back in June, in order to try and satisfy the board. We've eliminated, which we had examples that was of garage doors street facing, though some of them were 2-story units as opposed to 2.5-story. There is quite a bit of garage facing doors in there. And we removed that off of these drawings just to hopefully satisfy the board and find it, hope you guys will be pleased with that. So we've done that. As far as curb cuts concerns, you know, we're going to have off-street parking on this property. It's in the zoning, and it's certainly going to help us when it comes to us selling these properties, having some form of off-street parking. So we're only making curb cuts for 2 cars, which would, if the cars were there, if they weren't there, the buyers or the people who occupy this place would take up at least that many. I think our parking pad would accommodate possibly 2 cars, so that's 4 cars that would be off the street by eliminating 2 curb cuts. So we think that that's a plus as well, and it's needed. I think that's it for me. Other than that, it seems like we had gotten to the point where we complied with every single thing on here that is asked of the SULARD's guidelines. And the only thing that we didn't, I think it was partially, and some of that had to do with material. And we're open to working with the board if we, in fact, have to go with a certain material of the fiber, cement fiber, as opposed to vinyl. We prefer the vinyl, obviously for cost reasons at this point. But if the board insists that we go with fiber, you know, we won't push back on that. But aside from that, I think that we were in line with every item that she's gone down, and we hope that the board considers those things. If there's any other questions, I think Jason is available on here as well, and he can answer any questions that you guys may have from that point regarding the drawings, I should say. Thank you.
Commissioner Weber, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Can you talk about the trees that I saw in the picture? Are you able to save any of them?
Well, I'm a tree lover. I'm from California. You know, we love our trees. I can't say for certain exactly which trees are going to be need to be eliminated in order to do it. I think the curb tree that you see there in the front was certainly something that can be saved. That has nothing to do with the lot. But there's probably 2 other trees on there that sit in the center of the lot. And, you know, in all intents and purposes, I think those are going to have to be removed. But the one that sits on Lamney in the front, the larger one there, you see, I don't see why that one would have to be removed.
Thank you.
Further questions of the applicant or the applicant's architect from staff members?
I have a quick question for him about community consultation. So can you repeat, sir, what you said? Like you made an attempt to talk to the alderman and the community, but it didn't work out? I wasn't following that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if anyone's recalled the minutes before. We initially started the inquiring about doing this project back, I believe, if my memory is correct, right around 2016, 2017, at which time I think they communicated with us for a few emails, and then eventually the communication stopped. But which wasn't the biggest problem in the world for us. We didn't bark or make a big deal about it because we had a lot of other projects going on. We tabled it for a while, came back to it, and tried to pick up with it again with no replies or response. We then talked to Dan, I believe it's Kresnoff, and he told us that we can go ahead and start at least getting our plans together to submit to Cultural Resources. Now that was prior to the June meeting in 2021, in which we submitted. I think then they popped up and said no, and they weren't supporting it. So after that, I'd spoken to this prior to that meeting with Jack Coulter, in I would say around March, April, May of last year. At which time he came back and said, well, he didn't support it during the meeting because he said his constituents weren't. So I asked him, well, what do we need to do? And who do I need to talk to? He said he'd make arrangements for me to meet with those parties That never happened. I followed up a couple of times. It didn't happen. And then he put me in touch and told me to work closer and closely with Meg and Andrea, and that's what we did. So we've never run or hide our intentions here from Soulard, but at the same time, we weren't getting the cooperation in terms of replying to our emails and trying to work with us to get this done. So we felt the need to move forward at this point. And then it seems that when it makes the agenda, then we hear from them. So that's concerning for us as well. But we haven't tried not to make an effort to do that. And we have emails and text messages stating such.
Further questions from commissioners to the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Askins. I'm just curious, have you developed any other properties in the Soulard Local Historic District, or is this your first time around?
No, it's not my first rodeo. I've done a couple. I've also done some in the Compton Heights neighborhood. I can give you addresses for those if you need to see them. Never had an issue. Never had a problem with the neighborhood associations either. This is probably the first time we've had a little bit of pushback. And I will be the first to admit that the drawings, although we did prefer the front garage parking, we're content with these drawings as well, particularly the second and a half, the third floor side of it. So no, we've done a few, not just in Soulard. We've done I've done 2 in Soulard. This will be 3, and I've done a few in Compton Heights, and I'm doing 1 in Benton Park at present.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Further questions, commissioners? Tiffany, are you signaling that you'd like to speak? Or is this allergies?
I'm itching my eye, I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't see any other commissioners wishing to speak. Quick question, Mr. Askins.
Yes, sir.
There are conditions in the board's recommendation. Would you abide by those conditions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Killeen, have you got a motion?
I would move that the Preservation Board defer on this issue until community consultation and aldermanic input can be gathered.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Commissioner Killeen, any comment?
I think that I think what you learned today, this, Mr. Askins, if this vote goes per the motion, is that you're pretty close. But I think the neighbors I know down there, that's a very active historic district, I think your path will be smoother if they're on your side and the alderman. So it's probably wise to let them give a look. I know you've tried, but now you really have their attention and you've got a clue from us. So looks like a nice project.
Any other commissioner comment?
Yeah, Commissioner Robinson. So my concern here is, and I don't, to some degree, disagree with Commissioner Killeen, but I also know we seen this project back in June of 21. There have been substantial changes since then. There's also been 10 days that the SRG had an opportunity to review prior to this coming before the board. Being a developer myself, looking at this project and looking at where it initially started and where we sit today, and then cultural resources giving their cultural resources basically saying that they recommend approval. I have a hard time pushing this down the line another month, given the time frame that already exists. I understand where we are with the alderman and SRG, but without anyone opposing it, I have a hard time sending this back and for another month.
I agree with Anthony. I feel like he did everything he was asked, and now we're waiting for two groups of people to come back and give their opinion. And I feel like if all the deadlines were met and all the time was met, and I understand this is a preliminary review, but as a realtor, giving my perspective, because I think that's why I'm on, I know that time is of the essence with projects, and every day matters. So I feel like if he did what he was supposed to do on his end, I don't see why we would push it back.
Well, I guess I take the opposite and argue that considering that the staff report is not even right because we had to rush to get this on the agenda, that he submitted revised plans on the day the preliminary agenda came out. So it seems like we're bending over backwards here to get this on the agenda. And the 10 days that the SRG had, 4 of those were a weekend and 1 was a federal holiday. So I don't think that's really, again, we welcome community input, and I would think the developer would welcome community input. And since this has been such a long process and we're almost to the finish line, it just seems wrong to me that we would forego community input when, and again, to me, it looks like we are bending over backwards to get this on the agenda when he just submitted revised plans on the day the preliminary agenda was set.
I guess my opinion is then it shouldn't have gone on the agenda. So
I agree.
yeah, so it's not his fault. It was on the agenda. He made time to be here. If other people wanted to make time to be here, then they would. I understand people have other commitments and other things going on, but I don't think we can refer to it was rushed. If it was rushed, then we always get emails and say, this is going to be pushed back a month. But I don't think you get to the meeting and say, oh, we rushed this, now we're going to take it off. I don't think that's fair to the applicant.
Well, we actually got the materials on Friday, didn't we? That said the alderman had asked for it and the SRG asked for it. Is that when the supplemental materials came?
So,
Right.
So Commissioner Robinson, I am in agreement again with Commissioner Hamilton. If the project made the agenda, then it was done in a timely manner. The reality is, if it was not in a timely manner, then it does not make the agenda.
Mm-hmm. And this is Commissioner Allen. I joined Commissioner Richardson in trying to take this off the agenda, but I think since that vote failed, I think we should vote today. We voted to hear this. I don't think deferral makes any sense at this point. And there aren't many complicated issues from the staff perspective.
I agree, and we can't set a precedence to take things off the agenda because we know people are against it. To me, that's not right. So Orlando set his presentation. The Andrea or whoever reviewed it gave their opinion. So I don't see where the complication is. So I say we move forward with the vote.
Yeah. So I will add to that. It would be different if if people were against it, but that's not what we're dealing with now. What we're dealing with is deferral, not that people are saying, no, this is not right. This is completely wrong. We're not dealing with that. We're dealing with a deferral, which is different than this doesn't work, this doesn't fit. And obviously Cultural Resources has said, they are in support of preliminary approval. So why are we deferring this?
I would only note in effect that staff has not said that they in fact talked to the applicant last week and said that they had a request from the neighborhood association / alderman to defer consideration until next month.
No, that, I am understanding of the deferral.
I mean, this wasn't a surprise today. This is something that's been discussed for the last week because of the intervention of holidays and Mardi Gras.
Sure.
Commissioner, if I may interject, this was actually brought to my attention that they wanted to defer, not for the past week.
Mr. Askins,
On Friday.
Mr. Askins,
Yes, sir. Yes,
we
sir.
are talking to you right now.
Okay, I didn't know.
I
My
guess,
apologies.
I guess my concern is, I mean, we've had other, people in front of us and people aren't able to make it. And we're like, well, they're not able to make it. Let's make a decision based on where we are. So I guess I'm confused as to why there's so much discussion on this when all the timelines were met. Sorry, that's my laundry going off.
And I would add, it is a preliminary review. This is not an appeal. This is, I really don't think it's a major item to vote now. There still has to be a permit. There still has to be further,
I mean, we've spent so much time talking about this. I don't know why we can't proceed. And I would like to, do I call the question, Mr. Chairman? Is that how we get a vote going?
I can't even tell who's speaking.
Commissioner Weber.
It's Commissioner Weber.
I have no way of knowing that. Where's your camera, Commissioner Weber? There you go.
all right. At least he's not in his car.
Okay, some of us work.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, Commissioner, there's a motion on the floor that's been made and seconded. I will call a roll. Commissioner Allen, do you vote yes or no?
Wait, could you restate the motion, Mr. Chairman?
Motion is to defer consideration.
No.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
No,
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
No,
That is, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4 no's, 2 yeses, and the motion fails. Do I hear a second motion?
I have a motion. I move that we grant preliminary approval with the conditions that the siding on the east elevation and rear of the building be 4-inch cementitious lap siding, and that the Cultural Resources Office review and approve final design details and exterior materials and colors, and that the applicant meet with the SRG one time.
Is there a second?
second,
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll again. Unless somebody moves the previous roll.
previous roll.
Any objection?
I'd like to change my vote on the previous roll, though.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call a roll, sneakers. Commissioner Allen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
yes,
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Abstain.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
Yes,
Chair abstains. That is 5 yeses, 2 abstentions. The motion carries. Thank you, commissioners. Do we have our special agenda item yet?
We do. I believe Jason Whiteley is in the room, and I'm going to attempt to let him share his screen. Give me just one moment. Okay, Jason, I've just made you co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for my late arrival. My name is Jason Whiteley. I'm a research analyst with the Planning and Urban Design Agency, and I'm going to take just a couple minutes of your time to share a project that PDA and Crow have been on in recognition of Black History Month. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. So over the last few weeks, Crow and PDA have been working to identify and map sites of cultural and historic significance to the African American community in St. Louis. And our work, we've been able to publish that work on an interactive web map, which we've made available to the public through Crow's homepage. So from the Crow homepage under the project section, we've added this map of African American historic sites. And as you can see here, we've identified, I believe, about 150 sites of significance so far. And we've made this resource public so people can kind of see where these sites are in the city and also learn a little bit more about them. I would like to emphasize that this web layer is still preliminary, and we're hoping to continue to add new sites and also add some additional information on the sites we've identified thus far. So all of the little blue dots are sites, and you can click on them to see the site description, its address, its neighborhood, and then we've also provided a layer with historic districts for additional context. Yeah, so I think that was all I had to share. Are there any questions?
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really great that we've been able to allocate some time to this work, and I hope that we can continue to develop it and put it to some good use.
Commissioners, any comments?
I think it's cool. I love it. Mhm.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, we realize that this map is not comprehensive. It doesn't include everything. There's so much research to do. During the last board meeting, I mentioned that we would like to be going after some historic preservation fund grants. And this seems like an ideal project for us to try and get a grant to study, is to do an inventory, much like we did of flounder houses and of mid-century modern properties, to do a more comprehensive inventory of sites important to the African-American history of St. Louis. And I just look forward to expanding on this great groundwork that we've already laid with Jason's help. Thank you so much, Jason.
Problem. I'll go ahead and share this link in the chat, and then also this will be available on Crow's website moving forward.
That is excellent.
I'm gonna start sharing this. I love this. So.
Meg, would you be certain that the clerk of the Board of Aldermen, former Alderman Terry Kennedy, former Preservation Board member Terry Kennedy, gets to see this?
I will absolutely do that.
It is a project that I believe he would strongly appreciate. Thank you very much. Calling agenda item B 3234.
Can we get the PowerPoint back? Okay. All right.
My plan is to call these things randomly so that the PowerPoint is never correctly lined up. Bob, aren't you glad you're back?
Sorry, I was on mute. He's thrilled.
It's wonderful to be back. It's great.
We're thrilled to have him, believe me. All right, this is 3234 Hawthorne Boulevard, Compton Hill Historic District. You might remember this from a few months ago. They had came in to get a approval for a porte cochere, which was not approved. And they've kind of changed their plans at this point. And next. This is a location on Hawthorne Boulevard. And this is the site plan. As you can see at the top, it's labeled new pool house, but that's the existing garage, which it will be their new pool house. The dark gray is portions that are being added to the existing garage. There's an addition to the east, and then on the front of the pool house is a proposed covered terrace. Next. These are some views from the street of the existing garage and of the area next to the existing garage where the large evergreen is, showing their visibility from the street. Next. This is an elevation of the proposed garage. As you can see, they're proposing to use a stucco board on above the in the gable and on the front of the addition. We're not really concerned about the other sides as they are not visible from the street. Our issue is that while the existing garage is stucco, there is extremely small amount of that will actually be visible from the street when the new gabled cover and the addition are added to it. And we recommended that they use brick on the addition instead of the stucco board, because it does not conform in style or in design to the architectural style of the period in which the principal structure was built. There is no stucco on the main structure. The preservation or the Cultural Resources Office asked the Preservation Board that they grant preliminary approval with the front facade of the addition being brick instead of the stucco board. I will say that the neighborhood is in support of the project, and I believe there's someone here from the neighborhood to speak.
Questions from commissioners? Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
Hello, this is Ed Heine. I am an architect with Agape Construction Company. And we are not the builder and architect who submitted the porte cochere plan that was submitted the last time you reviewed it.
Do you see the staff recommendation down there?
Do I see a staff recommendation down there?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Have you seen the staff's recommendation?
Yes, I have.
Do you agree to it?
With regard to the brick instead of stucco?
Yes.
We would like to do do the stucco.
Okay.
Because that's, well, that is what was the material on the original garage. The original garage may have been built after the home was built. I don't know when it was built. It's an old structure, but I don't know if it was built at the same time or not. But we would like to build it with all stucco, including the front facing part of the garage and the gable over the garage. We would rather not do brick there. The owner would rather not do brick there.
Okay. Commissioners, questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Heine, you said there was a historic or non-historic garage here with stucco cladding, and regardless, what evidence do you have, photographs or any architectural drawings perhaps of what had been there?
We submitted photographs of the garage.
Is this design, do I understand correctly, is based on what had stood there to some extent?
We're adding on to this existing
Right.
garage. We're converting it into a pool house
Mhm.
and adding a, gabled porch in front of the existing garage. And the design is compatible in terms of the, materials and the scale. But I don't have any historic knowledge of how long it's been there or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, commissioners? Okay, who's here to speak for this or against this?
Hi, I'm Keith Buckholz from,
Hold on 1 second, Mr. Buckholz. Meg, who's up?
Keith Buckles, sorry.
Okay, then, now. Thank you, sir.
yeah, I'm Keith Buckholz from Neighborhood Standards Committee. We do like the garage addition pool house idea a lot better than the porte cochere. And we're actually ready to support the project if it goes forward with the recommendations from CRO. We do like the brick because it's going to be very visible from the street. And you're dealing with a Tudor style brick home in front of it. The garage, while I believe is probably the first garage on the property, I don't believe is as old a structure as the home. In fact, the garage used to set farther to the left and was moved at one time to that side of the yard. But when you're going down the street and you're looking back, you've got a completely brick house in the front, and I don't know visually where you'd be there. So we're ready to throw our support as a neighborhood behind it. But as I discussed it with the other people in Compton Heights, with the brick cladding on the front.
Thank you. Meg, who else?
That's all we have on this one.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Commissioner Allen, do you have a learned motion to make?
Yes. I move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval of the new building with the stipulation that the street-facing facade material be brick, and then final plans and materials are reviewed and approved by the Cultural Resources Office.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, commissioners, I'm going to call a roll. There's a motion before us that's been made and seconded. Commissioner Allen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioners, the chair abstains. The commissioner, I count 6 yes votes. The motion carries. Thank you, commissioners.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Who's speaking?
This is Ed Heine.
Yes, sir.
Yes. If you go back to that elevation that we were just looking at. So the gable over the porch, we certainly, doing that in brick seems to be historically inappropriate to put a brick to brick over, setting on wood columns. So I'm sort of assuming that we're going to exclude that from the front-facing materials being all brick.
Commissioner Allen?
That would be my understanding as well.
Okay.
If staff differs, jump in, but yeah, that I definitely think we're just talking about this wall elevation to the left
Right.
of the garage opening.
I had
Yeah.
understood the motion to refer to the wall.
Okay, I understood it as for any front-facing materials.
Okay.
And likewise, I understand that the side that we're at side elevation, not ceiling, we can maintain as stucco or siding.
Yes,
Do I understand that correctly? So we could choose to use stucco or siding for the side elevation. Now, does that suggest that we could also use stucco or siding for the gable?
That's something we can discuss.
Okay,
it sounds like you have a supportive neighborhood group and a supportive preservation board and a willing staff. And I suspect this project is going to be a very good one.
I think so.
Okay. Thank you very much, commissioners. Let's do agenda item C, beginning with 33.
Okay, this is 33 West Moreland Place in Sister West End Historic District. This is application for the extension of side elevation. Next. This is location at the corner of Westmoreland Place and Lake Avenue. Next. This shows on the left shows the proposed demolition that's proposed to occur. They're proposing to demolish the roof and gutter and the brick detail at the top of the side elevation, as well as the gutter and a small portion of the roof that they're planning to tie into. On the right is the proposed new roof configuration. Okay. This is the existing Lake Avenue, the west elevation of the building. It's a little shaded right on this photo, but in that shaded area at the top of the one-story portion of the building, there is a corbelled cornice that is would be going away in the proposal, and they would be extending that second story out to the edge of the current first story. Next. This is the proposed addition. As you can see, they are proposing to remove the corbelled cornice, mimic the projecting band that extends on the rest of the building, and with corner coins present on the second story or the two-story portion, and tooth in the brick and tie in the existing roof and second story corner span. Now, this is the rear elevation, basically showing the difference. It'll go from a gable to a hip roof. The issue is that the applicant wants to have a seamless addition that isn't distinguishable from the original building. However, the Central West End Historic District standards require that any addition be easily recognizable as an in addition to the existing building. I believe you received a letter from the Central West End Central West End Planning and Development Committee stating their opposition to the seamless addition that's proposed. The point of it is though that the people will know that it's an addition to the building and wasn't originally a part of the structure. And it kind of talks about the building itself. The Cultural Resources Office is in agreement with that analysis, and again, it doesn't other than the requirements for fenestration, which it does comply with. It definitely doesn't comply with the being easily identified as an addition. This is just some context. That's across Lake Avenue. And context looking north and south from Lake. The Cultural Resources Office recommends the Preservation Board withhold preliminary approval of the addition as it does not comply with the Central West End Historic District standards.
Kagan, this is a trick question. Did you consult with the 28th Ward Alderwoman?
Well, that would have been a little tough, as there is no 28th Ward Alderman at the time.
Okay, you passed the trick question. Commissioners, questions for Ms. Kagan? Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
Hi, I'm Rachel Dolan with Mitchell Wall Architecture and Design. And, for this home, it is highly visible on Lake Street and Westmoreland Place. And so far from this design, we have gotten very strong support from the trustees and neighbors, especially the one that is across the street at number 35, Rick Zimmerman. He's done, quite a bit of historical renovation, throughout St. Louis, and he was very thrilled with this proposal. So it has been well received in the neighborhood. I know that they did give a glowing recommendation for it via letter. There has been a lot of discussion with the Central West End Association. The first discussion was coming back with an alternate roof and different material, but we found that the alternate material was not present in the rest of the house. So we were a little concerned about the visual character going on, especially with a house of this nature. And so, following up that conversation, there was openness to having it blend a little bit more with the home. So potentially the material. So there was, discussion of pending a mock-up or, of the slate and the brick that's on the home. There was discussion of an offset in some manner. And something to note from the drawings would be that we do have a band denoting a horizontal line around the addition. And in talking with the trustees about this back and forth with the Central West End Association, they did not feel that it was very appropriate for the neighborhood, so that they felt like the current design really acknowledges the visual character of the current home.
Commissioners, questions of Ms. Dolan? Okay, thank you. Meg, who's to speak?
Jim Dwyer.
Jim Dwyer.
Yes.
There you are.
There I am. Here I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Happy Monday.
Yes, thank you. Happy so far. If you don't mind, I would like to read into the record the brief memo, one-page memo that I sent via the Cultural Resources Office earlier. And I want to do that, because I just generally speaking, not pointing fingers at anyone, I wonder how many people actually read things of this sort, and I want to make sure that the message is delivered. So if you'll bear with me, may I have permission to read my letter into the record?
Please do.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, at a meeting held February 19th, 2022, the Central West End Planning and Development Committee reviewed drawings and photos provided by Rachel Dolan, project architect, for a proposed room addition and exterior alterations at 33 Westmoreland Place. The existing structure, built in 1941 to plans drawn by Maritz, Young, and Dussard, is situated on a prominent corner lot and is highly visible from Lake Avenue, which serves as the gateway into both Westmoreland and neighboring Portland Place to its north. That high visibility elevates the level of sensitivity regarding design details and materials of the proposed new construction. Westmoreland and Portland Places were listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1974 and are recognized as the most palatial of the private places in St. Louis and as unique examples of American domestic architecture of their time. In his foreword to Julius K. Hunter's Westmoreland and Portland Places, James Neal Prim observed that quote, the long stretches of Westmoreland and Portland Places offer a scene of cumulative magnificence seldom, if ever, matched. The CWE Historic District standards provide that additions to existing residential buildings, quote, should be easily distinguishable from the existing historic building. Following its review of the proposed design, the committee recommended several relatively simple design refinements to the architect and through her to the property owners, intended to address the requirement of an easily recognizable distinction between old and new. Regrettably, all such recommendations were rejected. The CWE standards, which were adopted in 1978, exist for good reason and have been instrumental in preserving the irreplaceable character of the Central West End over the ensuing 4 decades. The integrity of the standards is dependent in part on uniformity and consistency in their application. We are aware of no compelling argument for this to be an exception. Accordingly, we urge the Preservation Board to deny this appeal and to direct the applicants and their architect to collaborate with Cultural Resources Office staff to develop a compliant design solution. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add to your remarks, sir?
Simply that it is the consensus of the Planning and Development Committee that an attempt to integrate new construction into the old in what is described as, quote, a seamless manner is an extreme uphill battle, or maybe perhaps not possible. I'm not certain about that, but the idea of integrating new materials into materials that have been in place now for 80 years and to do it in a seamless fashion is the prospect of success in that endeavor is slim to none. And specifically and explicitly, the standards require that any new addition to an historic structure be identifiable as such. And so we've recommended such simple measures as a slight offset rather than a continuation of the same plane as the existing west wall, a slight offset. We suggested that perhaps a brick course that would separate the upper from the lower, the new construction from what's below it, a brick course, a band that would distinguish one from the other would be helpful. And there were several other specific recommendations that were made, and some of which were subject to discussion and negotiation, could have been, but there was never that opportunity. The ideas were simply rejected. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Meg, anybody else?
If I could respond, in our lengthy discussions.
Ms. Dolan? Meg, is there anybody else to speak?
There is not.
Okay. Ms. Dolan.
I will say that, we did have a lot of back and forth with the Central West End Association, and we did propose, several ideas to the homeowners and trustees that were not well received. We have entertained, several of those ideas, but in our secondary conversation, it seemed like we could, look at brick mock-ups and slate mock-ups to potentially, pending approval. And, we do have the brick band, right now it's a little muddled in the photo, but we do have a distinguishable band in that design. So I think they're certainly open, but I think as the trustees, and the neighborhood has very strong feelings about this particular home.
Ms. Gagan, response?
Well, I think the band that they have now is the same as what's on the building, so I'm not sure that really distinguishes it from the original. I think they were proposing it to be more like a soldier course or something that was slightly different than what was on the building, the front portion of the building, so that it would distinguish it from what it was already there. The trustees don't necessarily look at the historic district standards when they're making their decisions. So and what we have to go by and what the neighborhood looks at is the historic district standards, which I don't think this at this point complies with.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Allen, another learned motion from you.
Oh, thank you. I move that the Preservation Board withhold preliminary approval of the proposed addition as it does not meet the Central West End Historic District standards.
Is there a second, commissioners?
Again.
Discussion? Commissioner Robinson?
Yeah, so, I think the applicant is probably in a really tough position here with this design. I've looked at it, reviewed it. I question whether they can create a nice design here while given what they have to work with while meeting the requirements. I do understand the delineation between old and new, but honestly, I short of changing brick patterns, things like that might delineate old from new. I think beyond that, it really sort of anything else sort of comes across as being just a very well not thought out add-on. Even if you've given some thought to it, it comes across in the final product as a not well thought out add-on. And so because of that, I think we put the applicants in a really tough position here with this design. I honestly, I think the only decent design here is essentially what's sort of there and going on top of what's existing. But I think that the delineation needs to happen in the materials that are existing more so than trying to bump out and make changes like that, because I just don't think that comes across as a well thought out design. I just don't think you're going to get there with that. And that is the issue here. I think, you know, you could do that, but I think you're just not going to have a good design. And so now the question becomes, what's the lesser of the two evils? You know, a design that complies but doesn't look very good, or a design that doesn't quite comply but works.
Commissioner Robinson, you don't have another bat there, do you?
No, I have a couple of gnats, unfortunately.
Better than bats, as we remember.
No, but no bats. If there were bats, you would not see me still here. I'd be running. But yeah, so that's my thought on where we are with that.
Commissioner Kalina, are you still on?
Am still here, yes, sir.
Observation, you've done this.
I would defer to Mr. Dwyer. That's his part of town, and I think he made a great argument.
Commissioner Allen, your motion.
Yes, I disagree somewhat with Commissioner Robinson. I think that, you know, the standards offer a very clear path here, but it sounds like from hearing the applicant's architect and Mr. Dwyer that the gap between these perspectives isn't quite that wide. What I see before us here is, you know, it seems like the Cultural Resources Office is actually allowing a lot of continuity with fenestration and form. And I see the slate roof and the brick, and I just keep thinking, you know, slight differentiation in color could resolve some of this issue, something that clearly is not original, but not widely different, and doesn't require a change in material. I would be comfortable with that as a member of this board, but I don't see that here. Thankfully, we're on preliminary review. I do think for the applicant, this is a good use of preliminary review. So I'm glad we're looking at it early. But I don't see this as so irreconcilable. And I think it sounds like, given all the inputs, maybe a strong input from this board could help resolve what seems like intractable tension.
Any other commissioners with comments? Okay, hearing none. Commissioners, there's a motion on the floor that has been made and seconded. I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Allen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Abstain.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
The chair abstains. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 2 abstentions. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Commissioners, moving through our agenda, I call agenda item D, 2018-2020.
Am I unmuted, I hope? I'm Jan Cameron with the Cultural Resources Office, and this is a preliminary review application to construct 2.
Jan, are you speaking?
Oh, I'm not unmuted.
Oh, that was pretty good, wasn't it, guys?
Oh, you're so. This is a preliminary review application to construct 2 detached, 2-story single families on this vacant piece of ground in the McKinley Heights Local Historic District. Next, please. And this is the site. You can see that there's a very good context. Oh, not so fast, Bob. Very good context on the block. Next, please. And the site plan, it includes 2 garages located directly behind each house. Next. And this is the front elevation. It will be the same for both. What you can see from the notes, but not so much from the rendering, is that the right section of the house will be a different color brick than the other, but they'll both be brick that's appropriate for the neighborhood. Next. Next.
We're working on it. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Slow tech here.
There it is.
Okay.
And here they are in the streetscape. So you can see the rhythm of this, the block is replicated, which is one of the requirements of the standards. Next. I should say there are some details such as the style of door that we generally look at when we get to the point of a building permit application. So don't cast a lot of impact on that. These are the side elevations, and they return, as we usually require for new construction. The brick returns the same distance as the distance between the buildings. That's what's shown here. Next, and they will be very close to the adjacent buildings. This is the model example, which is not from McKinley Heights, but is in fact from Shaw at 4062 Botanical. It is, however, not inappropriate in style for the historic district. Next. And this is the context of the street. So we're starting at the east and we're proceeding towards the site on the right. Next. And here is the directly adjacent to the east, and then the site with the large pine tree. Next. And just proceeding, Bob, you can go through these pretty quickly. This is proceeding up through that side of the block to the Serbian Church. And now we are looking at the opposite side of the block, which has some older structures on it, including this very fine single family. Next. Okay, so the context is very good. Now, we had initially seen a very contemporary design for this site. And in fact, the applicants were going to pursue the compatible new construction policy. But in the revisions after meeting with us and with the neighborhood group, the revisions really made that unnecessary, that they're actually following the standards in almost every point, with the exception of the brick foundation color, or the brick foundation and the color of the brick on the facades, the two different colors. Those we think are very modest changes and do not detract from the compatibility of the buildings. Now, I will say that we have not had a comment on this revised design from the neighborhood. Rocco Dana is here tonight, and he is going to comment upon it. But at this point, we don't have anything formal submitted. So the staff is recommending that preliminary approval be granted, subject to the usual conditions of review of final drawings and facade materials by the Cultural Resources Office. Question?
Commissioners? Okay. Is the applicant present? I can see you. I can't hear you.
Yes, he is.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Do you see the recommendation?
I do see the recommendation.
You agree with it?
I do agree with it.
If we have questions, can we ask them of you now?
Absolutely.
Commissioners, questions? Okay. Meg, who's first to speak?
Rocco Dana.
Mr. Dana, are you here? There you are.
Yes, I'm here.
It looks like
As
you're
I can
landing an
tell.
airplane.
What?
It looks like you're landing an airplane. That's excellent.
Everybody's coming in straight. All right, good, good. It's been a great process. We had a couple little hurdles to get through, but Leo and Tim are great to work with. So I did want to make some observations as Jan pointed out, things that the design has changed over time. So it's become more of a historic replica than a historic compatible. If we were to look at the building being brought from a different neighborhood is something that I'm finding over and over again to be kind of an issue. This one is actually brought from a neighborhood that's pretty far away. It's not an adjacent neighbor either. This shows here that these large stone headers are on top. Those large stone headers are not something that you would find on that block or in McKinley Heights. The other observation I have is that the streetscape, thank you here, the streetscape makes it appear, I understand these are done very quickly, makes it appear that the windows are really in rhythm and proportionally in size with the neighboring buildings. However, if you were to look at more the neighboring buildings of 2016 and 2024, you would find that they're a little bit squattier in 2016, and then in 2024 they are again a little bit squattier. They're not as lean as shown in the elevation. Also, we would like to see fiber cement siding used in lieu of vinyl. This is something that we've always been pushing for to have changed in our historic code, and fiber siding with a 4-inch exposure. So other than that, I don't think I have anything else to comment on at this time.
Great, thank you very much. Meg, anybody else to speak?
There's no one else.
Okay, Commissioner Allen, ready for another one of your learned motions?
Me again, Mr. Chairman. No, I would, in this case, I move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval. The project subject to review of final drawings and exterior materials by the staff.
Second. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, then. I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Allen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Commissioner Allen, that will be the last motion I ask you to make tonight.
Thank you. I'll keep my video on anyway.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
The chair abstains on this vote. I count 6 yeses and the motion carries. Thank you very much, commissioners. We're going to take a 2-minute break and then we're going to come back and hear an unusual appeal.
I was so excited to see that yellow house in the presentation. I sold that a few years ago.
That was a good looking house.
It was a great house.
Did you get a good
The judge's house.
The judge's house. It is the
Yeah.
judge's. It was the judge's house. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope the
It sold before it hit market. I sold it to a buyer before it hit market.
Gorgeous house.
It was. There it is. Yeah.
Okay, 2 quick minutes.
Oh, no, it's the plans for 620 Market. They're all
Sort of funny, every time an unmuted phone's text message pops, I look down at my phone to see if it's my phone. Okay, commissioners, we will now come back into session to hear an appeal of a staff denial.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, this is Dave Richardson. I think I will have to recuse myself from this one.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's begin. Jan, haven't we heard this before? Why is this back with us? Jan Cameron. There we go.
All right, sorry. What I said was, I'm going to tell you why it's unusual. But first of all, let me say that what is actually before the board this evening are 3 properties that have building permits applied for that have been denied for time, basically, because the ordinance only allows us a limited amount of time to make a decision.
So are we hearing this as a formal appeal then, or is this a review of some sort of?
We aren't hearing it as a formal appeal.
Okay,
And I will, hang on just a second. But in addition, we would like, because the part of the appeal does really addresses the whole development of 14 houses, we would like the board's guidance as to how to pursue should a variance be granted at the meeting tonight. That clear.
Okay,
Before
let's take your oath.
I'm sorry.
Let's take your oath.
Okay. I should say, first of all, before I begin, that the recommendation as printed in the agenda is incorrect. It talks about a preliminary approval, and in fact should be that the Preservation Board recommendation is to withhold the appeal, because until and unless it is positively determined that the alterations, which I'll discuss in a moment, cannot be seen.
Okay.
And then I would like to introduce into the record ordinance 64689, modified by ordinance 64925, which is our enabling legislation. The Lafayette Square Ordinance 69112 that established the historic district, Lafayette Square Ordinance 70926, which revised the standards as they are currently, the agenda, my PowerPoint, and my presentation.
Barb Burkett, was that sufficient?
Yes, I think that clarified it. I'm not sure that you got to swear our staff member in.
Oh, I swear to tell the truth.
Okay, Barb.
Yes.
Thank you.
This
Proceed.
is the site. It is going to have 14 townhouses on it. Some of them will be detached and others will be semi-detached. Next, Bob, please. This is the site. It is in what I call tier 2 of the Lafayette standards. It's not an official designation, but it is a lowered compliance requirement for certain, actually this property and one other property that was originally on the Praxair site. So it is not, there's also a lower tier where there is more flexibility. So this did not require following strictly a model example, as it would if you were constructing a townhouse on another vacant site in the district, but it does require some adherence to it. Next. And what you see at the top was what was presented and approved by the Preservation Board in October of 2019. And as you can see that there are some detached townhouses and some woods with side gable roofs. And what's below that is the current proposed, which is a little bit different, except it looks like it's just about the same, doesn't it? Next, please. This is a little chart that I put together regarding the status of permits that the Cultural Resources Office has seen and approved. So to date, the violet color are full building permits for full buildings. The gray color is for foundation only permits. And those that are numbered are the 3 properties that are being appealed at this meeting. Next. These were the model examples that were submitted in 2019. Again, they don't need to follow them absolutely, but they need to have some kind of compatibility with the model example in this particular parcel. Next. And the other 3 for the detached houses. Next. The proposal before you this evening, or actually is it being requested on these 3 building permits that we have, but is being requested for all the buildings, is rooftop decks on the 2nd story with access. Now, in many instances where there is a side gable roof, such as shown here, that will not be so much of a problem. If they are in the center of the site, that might not be so much more of a problem. But certainly the corner buildings need particular attention. Next, please. These are some sideline studies that were submitted to us by the applicant or the appellant, but he is going to present in more detail, so I think we would probably just skip over these for now. But the contention is that these protrusions, stay right there, Bob, go back, as illustrated in this elevation, will not be visible from the street. Next, please. This is the corner property. We are on the western end of the site, and it will, the 14 townhouses will fill totally this side of the 2200 block of Hickory. Okay, so this property will be visible both from Hickory and from Missouri, which is the street on the left. And then this is currently, you can see some foundations have been already constructed from previously approved applications. Next. And we're proceeding eastward along Hickory. Next. And now we're looking back. This is again the site, but what we're looking at there is a partially completed apartment building, which the board also approved. And they're having a couple more stories that still need to be constructed, but that will border these properties on the north. And the property, the slide on the right begins to show you McKay Place, and this property, the visibility of this property from McKay and from Hickory. Next. Again, this is McKay, and we're looking towards what's known as the ellipse, which was constructed maybe 30 years ago now, longer than I've been here. And you can see that it's almost impossible, I feel, that these roof additions will not be visible from the street. The right slide is the alley that will divide the commercial, the apartment building from these townhouses. Next. Now we're proceeding from north to south on Missouri, past the apartment building. Next. And this is the corner of Missouri and McKay. And again, particularly the slide you see on the right is going to be, I don't know how that this possibly can be hidden, but I'm going to let the developer make his case. One of the alternatives that we thought about doing was to change the shape of these very unusual forms into something that's more like a monitor or a flat roofed addition that you sometimes see. You don't normally see those on residential properties, But in order to give the developer every opportunity to make his case, that is something that the board may consider. Next. And that's it. So the staff is recommending again that any approval of these additions not be upheld until and unless we can all be convinced that we can't see them. So, any questions?
Is it good enough that we're convinced, or do you have to be convinced also?
Well, we're all going to be convinced.
Any questions, commissioners? Okay, Jeff. This is an appeal of a denial, so I'll need your name and your affirmation that you're going to tell the truth, and I'll need you to introduce any documents or other materials that you want in the permanent record.
All right, my name is Jeff Winzerling. I promise to tell the truth. What address too? 4229 Maryland Avenue, St. Louis, Missouri.
Now, we've actually stopped doxing people.
Oh, really? I'm here on behalf of Lafayette Reserve LLC. I swear to tell the truth.
Proceed.
Bob, did I hear that you're operating the slide today?
I am here doing the slide, so just let me know and I'll move them on for you.
All right, thanks very much. So first page here, you're actually seeing the development in color. These are the actual colors that we are proposing to build. This particular rendering has excluded the easternmost house because it faces McKay. So I'm not showing you the side of that building. But this is what we're building.
Do the colors have names, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. You bet they do. The houses are under construction from the pair of green and blue houses in the center, the two that are touching each other. So from the left of the yellow house, headed to the west, those houses are in various stages of construction. 7 of the first 8, so those houses starting with the house left of the yellow one and going down to the corner, 7 of the 8 are under contract or reserved. The only one of those that is not reserved or under contract is the one on the corner, 2245. Next slide, please. So here is the front and back elevation. So in 2019, we had a lot to contend with the neighborhood on siting. They were very concerned about siting and where it appeared. And we had a plan at the time that had a little bit of siding in it. And so let's look at the next slide and we'll come back. So here's the new bundle of ingredients. And let's go back up to the top again, or the previous slide again. So we changed the unit mix a bit. In 2019, we were going to do 10 attached units, 5 pairs, and 4 detached homes. And today, next slide, we're doing 3 pairs, only 6 attached homes, and the other 8 are fully detached. We have also made a lot of changes on the rear elevations. So let's go back to the previous one, the first. At the time of the 2019 presentation, we were offering a model that had a first floor master suite. And that first floor master suite projected out into the backyard. And we wanted to clad that in siding. And we're actually approved to do that as long as we kept it to the center of the block. And so the 2 buildings, I guess, that have, how would I describe them? Well, let's see. If you look straight down from 2325 and 2015-21, the ones, the backs of those houses, you see that the back projects a little bit. Those were wrapped in hardy board. And then there were 3 houses that have a offset second floor bedroom. In order to get 2 bedrooms side by side in the 20-foot width of the building, it was best to push one of them out, cantilevered a little bit over the back porch. And that too was clad in hardy panel. So we had 3 houses like that and 4 houses that had the sided wings. Next slide. We've done away with that first floor master suite design. So all those four wings that were covered in siding are gone. And we've reduced the bump out houses from 3 to 2. So the previous source of concern in the neighborhood about siding, we've really cut dramatically back on. We've also, let's go to previous slide. We deleted one of the HMEs. So over there at 2209 and 2211, we deleted that HME. And then next slide, we added a new HME over at 2241, which I believe is the next slide. There you go. We found a building on St. Louis Avenue that has the same address that we're building on Hickory. That house is sold. It's a 3-story. I believe it has, and this leads us into the conversation about third floors. So back to slide before, the before slide. There you go, thanks. In this scenario, those houses with the dormers, we thought we were setting the stage for a future possible shed roof with some third floor space and a walkout, but we didn't know how that was gonna unfold. And as we got deeper into this and started to design them, we found that the dormers just don't work. That the dormers with that roof slope, and you can see the roof slope down at the lower left, at that roof slope, the dormer just becomes a window at the end of a 6 or 7 foot long hallway, not usable space. So we've come up with 2 different approaches to third floor space that you're going to now see in you're going to see in the next page. So next slide. So there's a few different things going on here. You see 4 houses with third floors from the rear, but they look 2 different ways from the front. Let's go 2 slides ahead. There. So on the left is the mansard design, like the house that we found the new model example for. And on the right is the other one, which is it simply does away with the dormers, turns the front of the third floor into attic space, but then still has enough room for a good sized room and a full bath and doors leading out to the roof deck. That house is under construction. It has a building permit. So we're approved to do that. And then let's go back to 2 slides up. There you go. There's some other stuff going on the roofs here in addition to third floors, and that's what we're really here to talk about. And this is 3 slides ahead. There you go. It's, I call it a pop-up. The architect, Barry Nelson, calls it a roof monitor, as you can see down there on his sightline drawing. But the third floor space is extravagantly expensive. To do a third floor and a roof deck is $151,000 right now. The one, that's the mansard style. The non-mansard style is just a little bit less, remarkably. You don't save that much money once you pay for the staircase and the additional framing and the full bath. So it's a lot of money. And lots of the buyers wanted to get up and outdoors. That's been a pretty consistent demand. Even one of the houses that doesn't have a roof pop-up, the buyer has put a 2nd floor deck on the back of one of the 2nd floor bedrooms. So getting outside and up in the air has been a real consistent demand from a lot of our buyers. And so we come up with this solution of the pop-up, which is designed to be inexpensive because the 3rd floor is so expensive. And it's this triangular shape. It's essentially, it's an indoor staircase that leads to a door that allows you to go outside on the roof. On a couple of houses, there's like a little coffee bar on the 2nd floor. So that if you're up on your roof deck and you don't have any living space next to it, you can still get to very easily a place with a sink and a refrigerator or something like that. The sight line that you see here, is a section through, so it's perpendicular to the building. And Barry generated this in his system, so he was able to find the exact point, or the exact distance at which you could see just the very top of the roof, this little, we call it the, what I call it, the crest, the very, very peak of the triangle.
Jeff,
So
I have a question. How tall is that person, and why does it have an arrow in its head?
you have to talk to Barry about the arrow, but the person is probably about 5'5", 5'6". If their eyeballs are at 5 feet off the ground, you probably get about 5 or 6 inches of head above your eyes. That's what we used as the sort of the standard height for all of these. The geometry is worth noting, though. The right of way of Hickory. So Hickory, sidewalk, tree lawn, street, and then tree lawn, sidewalk on the other side is a total of 60 feet. And you can see that this person is actually 85 feet away from the building. So you'd have to be, so we're 15 feet, our building is 15 feet away from the property line. And then, so it's a total of 75 feet away from the south edge of the Hickory right-of-way, or the south edge of the Hickory sidewalk. You'd have to be 10 feet beyond that in order to see even an inch of the top of this roof monitor. There's some more we're going to look at that I created, and I don't have the technical skills or software that Barry does, so they're a little cruder. But our goal is to illustrate what I thought was clear from the beginning, but I'm still trying to persuade you all, is that these will not be visible from the street. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of some of the angles I looked at, and there's a reason for some of these. So this site plan drawing shows both the pop-ups, the long, narrow things. So there's one on 2245, there's one on 2233, and on 35, there's one on 31, there's one on 21, there's one on 15, and there's one on 05. And then it also shows the 3-story houses. And so the arrows that you see drawn, the sightline angles, have been drawn to kind of thread the needle between 3-story houses. So you see B and C there, they're trying to squeeze between the 3-story house at 2241 and the 3-story house at 2227. And then the same thing is true for D and E. A, which is kind of cut off by the title block at the bottom of the page, is the one we just saw on the previous page. Next slide, please. Oh, I guess I should mention that these are a little conservative in how I do them, because where Barry was able to actually plot the house in his software and show you the cornice and how far it projects from the building, I'm just using the face of the building as though it were the first line. So there's a little bit of it's slightly conservative, but let's look at the next slide. Oh, hold on a second. Let's go back. So this one, this imagines, once again, a person whose eyeballs are 5 feet off the ground. All of them, all the ones I did, are a little different. So Barry's was, how far away would you have to be to see just a skosh of the top of the pop-up? With my limited technology, I just said, okay, how about I put a spot 20 feet out into the street and see what we can see from there. And so mine are a little bit different. But so this is one of mine. It's a spot 20 feet south of the north curb of Hickory. So it's past the middle. Hickory is 36 feet wide. So 18 would be the dead center of the street. This is a little bit past the center of the street. And it looks up toward the roof monitor on 2231, because the ones on 33 and 35 cannot be seen from that point because the arrow would be cut off by the 3-story 2241. All right, next slide. So here you see in section now. So what we saw on the previous page in plan is in section on this page. We got our little guy in the lower left. The first vertical line is the cornice of 2235. And the little red line on the upper right corner is the top of the pop-up. And you can see that the line passes over it. And let's kind of move through the next couple of, so next slide. So here's C, next slide. The line passes over the top. Next slide. So D here, we're looking from another point. I actually did one from even farther west on the street. Kind of snuck in an angle that was just clearing the 2227 three-story building. And it also cleared the top of the monitor, but I couldn't, it would have needed a different aspect ratio or a different scale. And so it didn't fit. It stretched off the end of the paper. Next slide. So this one, you see it's going to hit, the sight line is going to hit the cornice of the 2223 house, blocking your view of the 2221 pop-up. Next slide. Here's E. Next slide. Same phenomenon. The vertical line that's left of the little guy is the 2211 cornice. That's the the top of the facade, and the pop-up is the crest of the pop-up. The very highest point of the pop-up is below the green line. Next slide. So I feel like this is kind of enough. I've already shown you that you can't see them. I also have dragged 2215 and 2221 into this, even though the subject at hand is supposed to be 2231, 33, and 35. I also want you to consider, and if you're able to offer an opinion on 15 and 21 and the visibility of a pop-up on those houses, to do so. But then I do want to take a few minutes just to talk about 2245. So that's why it's circled and highlighted in yellow. This is the corner house. It's the only one that's not sold. And next slide. We're going to take a look at a few of these sight lines. A, as you'll recognize, is a section through, so it's the exact same drawing, not quite. Next page. Next slide. Next slide. Looks just like the previous drawing, except I substituted a picture of the 2245 building and its relationship to grade for the one that was in there before. But essentially, it's the same phenomenon. Next slide. X, the point X here is at a point in the intersection of Hickory and Missouri on the parallel with the south curb of Hickory. And it's about 20 feet out into the street from the east curb of Missouri. And so in this one, you go over slightly over the corner of the cornice of the house, and you're trying to hit, we're always trying to hit the very highest point. If you can't see the highest point, you can't see any of it. So next slide. You can't see it. It goes right over the top. Next slide. This is point Y. This is a perpendicular view from across Missouri. Missouri is only a 40-foot wide right-of-way. So the bottom of the arrow where Y is would actually be someone whose eyeballs are 5 feet off the sidewalk with their back pressed up against the building that is on the other side of the street, because it's at the very edge of the right-of-way. Next slide. And you can see it's very steep when the street's only 24 feet wide. If you can only get this far away, you're only 45 feet away, that a building that tall is going to block anything. Next slide. So before we look at the last one, I think that in Jan's presentation, she showed you some current sites of the shots of the site that show that building going up back there. They give you a pretty good idea of how much that building blocks any view from the north. Here's a view from the side that shows you how tall that building is. All these folks who are doing roof decks, I tell them right up front that they're not going to have a panoramic view. I actually put a drone up and took some photos to the east and to the west and to the northeast a little bit and the northwest a little bit. And those are the photos that I share with them and say, these are going to be your views. The apartment building is going to block your view directly to the north. But as you see down the lower left corner, this is a view turning from Shoto onto southbound Missouri. The yellow arrow indicates where the 2245 house will be. The 2245 house, because all the lots are slightly parallelograms, it actually extends out beyond the footprint of the apartment building. So it will be visible from here at the, just turning in from Shoto. The next photo is pretty much at LaSalle. And then the next photo, the last photo on the right, is the view from point Z, which is the next slide. So there it is in plan. Next slide. And there it is in section. And this is the first arrow that has hit anything. All of our arrows have been going over the top of buildings, and now here's one that actually hits something. It hits the pop-up. From that distance, we're well past our site. We're north of the alley that bounds the northern boundary of our site. But still, from that spot, you can see a little bit of pop-up. Next slide. And that's a look at what you might see. You see a little bit of railing, and I believe we see 2 feet of railing and about 5 feet above the railing of the pop-up. The pop-up is only 4 feet wide. It's just wide enough for a staircase. So we're looking at something kind of like a oversized refrigerator sitting on the roof. The reason why I think it's important to offer the pop-up on this house is, as I mentioned a minute ago, this is the only one that can have a view to the north from the roof deck. So with visibility comes a view. They go hand in hand. And my request to you, in addition to acknowledging that the pop-ups on 22, 31, 33, 35, 15, and 21 will not be visible from the street, I'd like you to just let me go ahead and do this one. It's a huge benefit to the home. This is the only home that can have a large view to the north from their roof deck. And the cost is seeing something that looks like a refrigerator up on the roof, which is very minor. And then finally, I'd say that when we did the previous approval, it seemed like there was kind of a consensus that when we talk about visible from the street, we're talking about visible from the adjacent street. You guys were prepared to let me do the wings with siding on them, even if you could maybe like stop somewhere on McKay and peek through the alley and see a corner of it, because it wasn't visible from the adjacent street. And I think we're in the same situation here. This pop-up is visible, but it's not visible adjacent to the property. So are there any more slides? No, okay. Well, so that's my request.
Commissioners, questions for Jeff? Okay, hearing none. Who did this? Jan,
Yes,
you just saw this?
I did.
Questions or observations?
I think that something should be done to the design of the pop-up for 2245.
Thank you.
Now, there are also neighborhood representatives that want to testify. I'm not sure that they.
No, I can see that
in the chat.
What about painting it like a refrigerator?
Like a SMEG, yeah.
Okay, Meg, who signed up to speak?
Suzanne Sessions.
Okay. Commissioner Richardson, are you here? Commissioner Killeen, are you here?
I am indeed here. Yes, sir.
Will you take over the meeting for just a minute, please? I've got to go deal with an issue here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have some folks who want to speak on this?
Commissioner Colleen, I'm sorry. May I just point out, just so we're remain clear, that this hearing is an appeal of 2235, 2233, and 2231. Any comments about 2245, there was no application for preliminary review, so these would just be guidance. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that in the same way that Jan Cameron did at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you, Barb. Okay, and so did we have some folks to speak? I don't have the list in front of me, so.
Yes, Suzanne Sessions is here.
Okay. All right, Suzanne?
Yeah, I'm going to try. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and I think we've got to swear you in for this one.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm on my iPhone. I had technical problems one more time. Thank you very much, everybody. Do you want me to swear in?
Yeah, name, we got your name, so your address, and you'll, that you'll tell the truth.
Yeah. My name is Suzanne Sessions, and I'm a member of the Preservation Committee of Lafayette Square. And I promise to tell the truth. Okay, I'm going to read you, if I may, the letter that I sent to Cultural Resource Office this weekend. And I sent it hoping that we would see something else before I wrote the letter from the developer to deal with the problems at hand. But this is the letter I wrote. On Monday, January 24th, the Lafayette Square Preservation Committee, and that's, by the way, is our new name, the Preservation Committee, reviewed a request from the developer for all 14 townhouses now to have rooftop access, 2-story or 2.5. Only 2 front view monitor sightline drawings were provided to us, both of interior buildings that were on the agenda tonight for discussion. The committee had concerns and still does have of sightlines from the street at the 2 corner homes, 2201, that's at McKay, actually 2203, the one right behind it, as well as 2241 and 2245, if indeed one of them was not going to be a mansard roof. There was also concern about the shape of the pop-up access because it was unlike any original on a historic home in our area. The committee asked to see possible variations without a slanted planked shape and proof of obstruction from the street view of the end units. A month later, having received neither site obstruction diagrams or historical model example to qualify in our revised Lafayette Square Historic District standards, we found 101.5 atypical massing, which that was in the beginning of our descriptions. It says massing of parts of a building or an entire structure that is not seen in historic buildings. And 201.8H, no roof decks on top of uppermost story of a structure shall be visible from the street. All right. And based on those and the additional findings presented by the Cultural Resource Office, we urge the Preservation Board to uphold the director's denial unless it can be positively determined that all pop-ups and rooftop railings will not be visible from the street. And so 2 of us, Kyle Jeffers and myself, spent Saturday as opposed to at Mardi Gras, scoping out the area for ourselves to see if we had a difference of opinion from what we believed it was going to be, and we don't. We still have the same problems. That's 2201, 2203, those first 2 ones, will be seen from the side of Hickory, from the back. Now, we've only been looking at front views of Hickory, going straight up the street, and that's not where this problem is going to occur on these 2 buildings. And the issue right now on 2245, it's still the issue because I somehow don't think an oversized refrigerator is a good view to have for any part of the square. We could find no other examples of an original historic pop-up refrigerator shape or any other shape. So with that, and the additional findings presented by the Cultural Resource Office, we urge the Preservation Board to uphold the director's denial unless it positively determined that all pop-ups and rooftop railings will not be visible from the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Killeen, I am back. Anybody else wanted to speak, Meg?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton, have you got a motion?
Yes. My motion is that, because it's my understanding, based on the agenda, we're talking solely on 2231, 2233, and 2235. So my motion is that the preservation overturn the administrative denial regarding the pop-up roof or in the rooftop deck, because it's not visible. So I'm thinking we're just talking about those three, even though other numbers have been thrown in. I'm going with what the agenda says. So that's my
second.
I'll second it.
Barb, is the motion clear?
Yes, the motion, yes, the motion is to overturn the administrative denial as to 2235, 2233, and 2231 with respect to their pop-up roofs, as I understand and have recorded it.
Commissioner Hamilton, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion, commissioners?
So my understanding right now is really based on all of the evidence I've seen, the only pop-up that would be visible is 225 at some really great distance. And then beyond that, you know, at least from what I have seen in evidence, all other pop-ups are not visible. And I'm just trying to get a clarification on that, but that's my understanding.
Could I comment?
No, we're in a different part of the meeting at this moment.
And this is,
that was my understanding too. I mean, there's a lot of evidence and detail and slides that went into the presentation. So
yeah, I concur. I think we're dealing with a very small visibility issue, and it frankly, it does not bother me much.
Yeah, okay.
Further comments from commissioners? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to call a roll. There's a motion before us, has been made and seconded. Commissioner Allen, do you vote yes or no on that motion?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no on that motion?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no on the motion?
yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no on the motion?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no on the motion?
I was a recusal.
That's correct, you were. Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no on the motion?
Board Member Weber had to leave.
Okay. That is, the chair abstains on this motion. That is 4 yeses, no nos, 1 abstention. The motion carries. Meg, have we
Yes.
done enough? Have we done enough on this item?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioners, that
Get
completes
some
our,
advice?
it does. Commissioners, that completes our run through this agenda. Did anybody else have anything to add for the good of the order?
No, stop sharing.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Without objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you, commissioners, for your patience.
Good night.
Thanks all. Thanks, staff.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Should I stop again?
Let's leave it.
Camera off.